Hello everyone. So in this video we are going to see how to debug the ZMM application, which is a .NET application um, through Docker. So what happens is that when you have a standalone application, .NET application running, you can set breakpoints in VS Code and debug it. But how about when your .NET application is running through Docker? So we know that the Docker will not expose the container outside. So in that case, how do you debug the code which is running inside the container? So to do that, in VS Code, what we see is that in the ZMM, I'm just making some changes in the Docker file. So this is the Docker file which corresponds to the ZMM image. I've just added, I just basically added one command over here. So it installs VS Debug. So VS Debug is a utility from Microsoft to debug the container, Docker container, which is a .NET container. Now, once we do this, I publish the image, and then I'll have an image like this. So this is my PowerShell. So when I just do a Docker image ls, so this is the image that I have. So in this image, I have the utility where I have installed VS Debug plugin to it. Now, what are the additional changes that we need to do? Now the question is that when we have installed VS Debug utility inside the Docker container, and I would like to set the breakpoints in the code, but where would that code lie? And obviously, we cannot access the code of the Docker container through VS Code, because that would mean installing a VS Code inside the Docker container. And this Docker containers might be a very lightweight, like Alpine or the Ubuntu based. So it doesn't make sense to have a GUI interface inside the Docker container and doing those things. So what we're going to do is that we are going to map a .NET code base in the host with a .NET code base inside the container, and we are going to debug the Docker container from setting the breakpoints outside the container, which is basically the .NET code base running in your host. So to do that, what are the changes required? So the first change which is required is we go to the launch JSON, and this in the launch.json we need to have this setting. So what I have done is that I've basically selected a separate folder. Let me go to, let's say, inside Zmodder, right? So this is one particular folder where I have a ZMM base. So this is something which you can probably suppose the .NET ZMM version is master in your Docker container which is running. You need to sync the same version outside as well. Basically, what it means is that the ZMM which is running inside the Docker container and the ZMM which is running outside the Docker container should be same. Once I sync the ZMM, I go inside, I basically open this directory in the VS Code, and I open the launch.json. In the launch.json, I am defining a setting which is attached to ZMM Docker. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to fill up some particular few settings, and I'll describe what are those settings. So the first one is the source file map. The source file map basically stands for the directory which is in your Docker container and the mapping inside basically in your host machine. So the workspace folder is basically my this current folder, and inside that I have basically this two publications email, and so this is where I'm mapping my code from the container to the CML. Now the other thing is that where is the debugger path? So I have installed the VS Debug utility using my Docker file. I've installed the VS Debug utility inside the publish folder in the Docker container. So when I go back to my launch.json, so this is where my debugger path is, and giving the name of the, this debugging utility pipe program is Docker, and the pipe CWD is basically my workspace folder and Gmail. So this is my workspace folder, and inside the Gmail, this is where I'm going to debug the code. When I hit the breakpoints here, that would mean it is hitting the breakpoints inside the Docker container. So that is how the mapping is being done. So to do that, we give the pipe args as exec -0. So when this debug configuration runs, I'm going to go inside the container CNM and debug the container code, which is mapped to the outside. Right. The other thing is that which is present in the same directory. Now we have published the images, and now we want to run the Zmod application. So when we run the Zmod application, I have mapped the code here. So this is one additional setting that need to be done in the Docker Compose. So this means is that in the current directory, my Z1 folder is mapped to the containers publish and Z1 directory. Else everything is going to be same. There's literally no change over here. Yeah. One more thing which is important is that, I'm sorry I forgot to say this, but once you install this utility, right, you need to publish the code using Docker .NET publish -c -debug. So we are going to publish the code, but with the debug flag, then only we would be able to debug inside the container. So these are the changes that we need to do. Now let's go inside a particular file, and let's see what we could open over here. So let me go inside, let's say ZMM and src and then app, and let me open data controller CS over here, and let me go to the startup CS first, and in the startup CS wouldn't do it here. Let me open the program.cs because that is where the first time the execution come, and I hit a breakpoint over here, right? Now what I'm going to do is that this we are doing in PowerShell. So I have the images and I have the corresponding Docker file which I'm using to up the CMod. So I'm simply going to give the command which we all of us are aware of, that is cmod up. So this means now cmod up is up. We could check that as well. So let me see if I type here localhost. Is it 7007 or is it, yeah, so it is 7007. Okay, so I come here. So this is now what I would want to do is that I would want to upload some data, and I would want my breakpoint to hit correspondingly. So let me minimize this for a time being, and let me go back over here, and let me also open, apart from program.cs, let me also open data controller. Inside data controller, let me go to the line number, maybe it is 140, and hit a breakpoint. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is that go to the debug session, and because this is defined in the launch.json, we'll get that configuration over here, right? And let me just do attach to it, choose the application, which is the .NET application, .NET app dealer environment go to production. So in the host machine, wherever my CMM application is running, this is where this command get executed. So once I do this, my debug console will work. It will start loading the images. What it is trying to do is that it is trying to run those things inside the container, because if you see the top, this is where it does docker exec -z using VS debug utility. Now let me go to the browser back again here, and if I refresh something, I would see those changes here now. So that means is that this is the application which is running through Docker, but I see the logs in my host machine. So we are able to reach the container log, right? Now let me just pause it and see what's happening here. So we know that this is the location where it gets hit. So now the first breakpoint is hit over here, and let me just continue it and just try to upload a data. I'm going to upload a data. So I expect that it will be hitting here. So it goes to the data controller.cs and it is hitting the breakpoint over here, right? Now if I let me do this simultaneously so that you know that what's happening. Okay. So once I continue this, my data is now uploaded. Yeah. So this is how we are going to debug the .NET application running inside the container through Docker and VS Code. Thank you.